Welcome back to another episode of Super Fast Income. Today, I'm excited to introduce Noor Barrage, the systems girl, a true operation expert who turns struggling businesses into smooth running machines. Noor has scaled 2 companies to 7 figures and managed teams across 7 time zones. As founder of NVB Collective, she helps business owners build systems that work without them being there all the time. Who doesn't want that? Her track record speaks for itself, improving delivery by 30%, building operations that actually scale. If you are tired of being trapped in your business and want to finally grow while working less, today's episode is exactly what you need. Noor is the go-to expert when entrepreneurs want to stop working in their business and start working on it. She's on a mission to make businesses more sustainable and break down common beliefs that hold entrepreneurs and their business back. So, without further ado, welcome Noor to the show. How are you today?
I'm doing really, really well. Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this conversation, so really, really glad to be here.
You have helped scale 2 businesses to 7 figures as Chief Operating Officer. What's the one system most consultants completely overlook that caused them to stay stuck to 6 figures?
That's a really, really good question. And I think often when I'm asked that, people expect a really complex answer, like, some really complicated system. And the answer is that it's a lot simpler than most people think it is. So, to answer your question, I would say that a prioritization system is what separates those who are stuck at 6 figures and those that are able to scale beyond. So, the kind of key in bridging that gap between 6 figures, 7 figures, 6 figures, 8 figures, 9 figures, beyond is understanding where your time as the business owner really needs to go in order to drive things forward. And prioritization is key there. So you can't do everything at once. And if you try, you will be overwhelmed. It will lead to burnout. And most importantly, you're just going to be stuck doing menial things that don't actually move things forward. So prioritization is the system that I think is key in bridging that gap between 6 figures and beyond, because it means that you are devoting your very valuable time towards the right things.
What would be your advice to someone who wants to make better decisions and organize their priorities more efficiently?
A couple of things. I think understanding that although as business owners, we want to do everything, we can't. We can't do it alone. We cannot do everything. I think accepting that is kind of the first step in allowing us to move forwards. So understanding that it's not possible to do everything. We are going to need help. We're going to need to focus on a few key things that only we can do as business owners, and then delegate, automate, remove the fluff. And I think that is really, really, really important if people are serious about scaling.
So many of our listeners are trading sleep and family time for clients' work. What's the fastest way to break this cycle without losing revenue?
People often say to me, I'm so busy. And I often have people approach me saying, I'm too busy, I can't focus on this, this, this. Or I typically get a lot of pushback when I speak about burnout, which I think we'll get to a little bit later in our conversation. I am very anti burnout. I don't think that it's necessary. And oftentimes I get pushback from people who are staying up late, who are hustling, and they tell me I'm so busy, there's no way that I have time to take on this additional thing. I'm fulfilling for clients, I'm doing this, I'm really struggling to sleep, I'm not spending time with loved ones, all of this stuff. And it goes back to what I said initially, which is busy doesn't mean productive, busy does not mean efficient, busy does not mean that you are focusing on high impact activities. So when people tell me that they are trading sleep and family time, their health is suffering and they're doing all of this because they think that is the only way that their business is going to grow, that they're going to be able to take on more client work, I ask them to do what I call a time review or a time audit, which is we sit down, we look at everything that's going on within usually a 2-week period, but if we can extend that to 30 days, that's great. And we look at where time is actually going. And I think what shocks most people when they do this activity is how most of these activities are not actually anything that is high impact that leads to growth. A lot of it is reactive work busy work, a lot of fluff, a lot of admin, a lot of things that could be automated if they had the right systems in place, if they had automation, if they had an assistant. I think the fastest way to break this cycle is to look at where time is going, to make sure that we are prioritizing where we're putting our time, because time is finite. It's not, something that we have, tons and tons of. Like, it is a finite resource. So we need to be really, really careful with where we put our time. And in my experience, that does not come at the expense of revenue. So, I think the true mark of great systems, of great processes, of automation is that they can help us get back our time so that the revenue of the business doesn't suffer, but we are focusing our time on high impact activities and then getting rid of the rest, whether that's via automation, delegation, or just kind of removing the fluffy bits out.
That's so valuable. And this exercise that you just described helped me so much. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing it. What's the biggest operations myth that keeps skilled professionals stuck in the corporate grind instead of building their own consulting business?
That is a really interesting question. I think that operations need to be something really complex. Oftentimes, operations is a buzzword, and I think it means different things to different people. And again, when I talk to entrepreneurs, business owners about operations, usually, they start talking to me about really complex things and workflows. And that isn't necessary. I mean, yes, that is what operations are, but, operations is also an efficient calendar system, an efficient prioritization system, an efficient way to track all tasks and projects and monitor deadlines. That is operations. And, having the kind of key foundational systems and processes in place does so much more than most people think it does. And that's kind of what we need to look at before we start looking at complex automation and, very complex workflows and all of these things. So I think the biggest myth is that in order to build an operation, build a business that does not demand one person's sweat, blood, and tears, we need to have really complex operations in place, because that isn't the case. So I'm, for all intents and purposes, a solopreneur at the moment. I have an assistant and I have an editor, but the reason that I can do the amount of stuff that I can do and run quite a larger operation than most people think is because I have the kind of key foundational systems and processes in place, which allow me to do a lot more than what most people think one person and, a virtual assistant can do.
That's awesome because operations, they can really build the leverage and is the foundation of a business, which is working without you. So, for some new to consulting who is overwhelmed and juggling family commitments and work, which three systems should they build first to maximize impact and time freedom?
I love that question because it's something that doesn't get asked very often. People love to talk about sales and marketing, but the less sexy, glamorous side of business, people don't like to talk about that. And that's kind of what I love talking about. I would say the three most important systems to get in place earlier, like as early as you can, whether you are a solopreneur or you are a freelancer or you are an entrepreneur with a team already but don't have these in place. The top three, I would say, is a calendar system, because if you don't have a calendar and you don't have a system around your calendar so that you know where your time is going and you're being proactive about it rather than reactive. So if you don't have a calendar, then you are not in control of your time. Someone else is. So the first one is a calendar system. The second one, I would say, is a prioritization system, because again, we cannot do everything. So understanding what we need to do at whatever point in time is going to be key. So typically, what I advise is you pick three key priorities for the week and make sure that you block those into your calendar so that those things get done. And then everything else kind of falls around those kind of three key priorities. So that's the second one. And then the third one is a task management or a project management system. So oftentimes people, when I talk to entrepreneurs, business owners, and I ask them, what is it that you have on your plate right now? What's going on? They'll start telling me all these different things. And it's a lot. It's never like, I have this thing to do. It's like a never ending list that somehow lives in their head. And I'm always so shocked that they're willing to allow such valuable space in their head get taken up with this never ending to-do list. And I think, imagine if you could create space in your brain so that everything that you need to do is somewhere else and you've written it down. And often just the act of writing everything down, you feel an immediate like alleviation of stress because you're like, it's not up here anymore, it's somewhere over there. So now suddenly I have all this mental bandwidth to think creatively, to be present with loved ones, to look after myself, and to think bigger picture, to think about the vision and what needs to happen in order for us to move from where we are now to where we need to be in a year or, 5 years. So I think creating that space in your head is so important. And then also, visionaries love to create. And I think most entrepreneurs have more visionary tendencies than operator tendencies. It's very, very hard to create and to keep track of all of these things in your head. It has to live somewhere. So I think having a really clear way to keep track of deadlines, keep track of work, and this becomes even more important as you start to build people behind you. So whether that's you're a solopreneur and you have an assistant and you work with maybe one or two external parties, or you have a larger operation behind you, you have like an in-house team, a task management, project management system is the crux of how things move and how things get done. And if you don't have one, you will be trying to stay afloat, and that eventually leads to burnout. And I know from experience. So I think those are the three like really key ones, I would say.
I know your favorite is Trello, right?
Yeah, so I like Trello. And I will be honest, it is not the most robust in terms of automation and what it can do. I just like it. And because I don't have a massive team, it makes sense for me. I would say that if for people who have a larger team, and so I would say, beyond a virtual assistant and a few external parties, ClickUp, I believe, is the most robust. It's a little less user-friendly than something like Trello. But yes, I use Trello. I think Trello is great and it's visually appealing, which for me is important because I stare at it like all day. So Trello is fantastic, but if it's not for you, then there's such a wide array of softwares out there to use. ClickUp, Asana, Monday.com, Notion. I will say that Asana, I don't know if I'll get in trouble for saying this, but I don't like it. I think it's really, really limited and it also lacks it doesn't follow logically. Like I think with softwares like this, if you are techie, and I would consider myself quite techie, you should be able to figure things out intuitively. I don't think it's intuitive. I think something like Trello is really like dummy proof. Like you can get in there and play around and figure out how to do things. It's quite easy. And that's kind of why I teach and I coach on Trello because it's very like beginner friendly.
I know you love simplicity. You mentioned to get everything out of your head so you have headspace to think. Do you do journaling?
I do. So I would say there are kind of three different ways that I journal. The first one is prompt based. So I have a prompt and I get them online and I'm happy to share the link. But I have a prompt every single day, which I get online, and I use that to just write. And it just helps me make sure that I'm writing daily. And it's nothing to do with business. Usually it's like, what do you prefer, movies or television, like TV shows? And then you just kind of write and it gets you into the habit of like writing pen and paper daily. And so I've been doing that every day so far this year. The second one is more traditional like stream of consciousness journaling. So you just get blank paper, pen. I like writing pen and paper. I think I'm old school there. And you just write whatever's in your head. And it's a nice way to kind of offload any emotions, tension, how you're feeling, etc. And the third one, which for me has always been so important and how I'm able to manage so many different things, very much related to business, is what I call a brain dump. So I do this as often as I need to, but I would say minimum once a week I sit down and it's in my calendar to do this once a week. And I will take everything that's in my head and put it onto Trello. And then I'll sort that. So is this a piece of client work? Is this related to marketing? Is this creative? Is this to do with editing videos? Is this something that I need my assistant to see? And I'll kind of sort it through so that I can then look at the coming week and go, okay, what are the priorities? What did I just need to offload and now it's someone else's problem, etc. So I'd say that's for me always been super, super helpful because often as entrepreneurs, we have a million things happening in our heads at once. And sometimes it can be really, really difficult to offload that in a way where you know it's going to be captured and then something is going to become of it. It's not just going to be forgotten. And this is why I like to do that on Trello, because it's a way to store everything in my head. And once it's on there, it's not in my head anymore. So again, you feel that immediate, like it's on type thing. Yeah.
That's awesome. So we talk about priorities, we talk about simplicity. How can someone like new parents working until midnight at their kitchen tables create client boundaries without losing business?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I will say that, like, hands up, I'm not a parent. I do not have children. So my way of doing business and structuring things is going to be very, very different. However, I think I can offer some value on setting boundaries because it's something that I used to be horrific at, and I had no boundaries at all. If I was at a family event and someone asked me to reply to an email, I was replying to the email on a Sunday at 3 p.m. So it's something that has taken me years to get clear, and is something now that I am very on it. So I would say the first thing is to make sure that boundaries and expectations are set and managed from the get-go. So the moment you get a client in, and I will say this process begins before you start getting clients in. So you need to understand, what are my boundaries? What is acceptable for me? What is realistic? What is a realistic response time that clients can expect? So is that one business day? Is it between the hours of 9 to 5 UK time, 1 hour response time? Outside of that, unless it's urgent, it's not going to get replied to. So figuring out what makes sense for you, and being very, very clear with what that looks like, and then communicating that to the client from the get-go. So making it super, super clear. Here's what you can expect from me. Here's what I expect from you. So I think boundaries are challenging because it requires us to be really clear in how we're communicating that. So I tell you, here's what you can expect from me in terms of my availability. But then it also requires me to uphold those boundaries, which can be really, really hard to do. We cannot expect a client to always be respectful of boundaries. So we can communicate, hey, here's what is acceptable. Here's what you can expect. Here's my response time. When you send me something to look through, here's how I will always be clear with when you can expect it, etc. But we cannot always be clear. We cannot always expect clients to be respectful of boundaries. And this is where things get really, really difficult. When you tell a client, hey, I'm unavailable between the hours of 6 till the next day at 8 because I'm going to be with my family. And the client is like, yeah, of course, absolutely. Love it. Makes sense. And then you get a Slack message at 7. And this is where it gets difficult. You have to be able to uphold that boundary, or you cannot ask the client to uphold it. So if I say to a client, I'm unavailable after 5 o'clock, and the client messages me at 6, and I'm like, yeah, I'll get back to you tomorrow, I am teaching that client that it's okay and that they will get a response if they message me outside of that window. And so I think that's where people really, really struggle. And I think there's this misunderstanding, or this misunderstanding that if I'm not available constantly, clients are going to go away, or they're not going to think that I value the relationship or I'm serious about the work. And that's not true, because when I started respecting my time more and I started being really firm with those boundaries, more work came to me. And it led to a better relationship between myself and my clients. So they know that if there is something urgent that happens, number one, I class very few things as urgent. And I make that really, really clear from the get-go. Entrepreneurs love this word. It's urgent. It's not. It's 99.9% of the time, it is not urgent. And I will fight people on that. So I think there's this fear that we have as business owners that if I put boundaries, clients are not going to take me seriously. Clients are going to think that I'm less committed to them. And that's not true. If you communicate your expectations of them, and you tell them what they can expect of you, and you reinforce that throughout the client journey, you're fine. You're completely good. Like, no one expects anyone to be available 24 hours, 7 days a week, unless you're a doctor and you're on call, but we're not. So I think it's something that is uncomfortable because this is a narrative that is constantly seen in the business space. And it's something that I'm working really hard to try shout about and try break down, because I think it's really damaging. It's leading to far too many good people who have a really good product or a really good service burning out and resenting clients because there's no boundaries. But we need to teach clients that we have boundaries, and we need to teach them to hold their own boundaries as well. And it is really, really challenging. But I would say starting with really clear expectations from the start, from the get-go, and then working to reinforce those boundaries whenever it's like a kind of back and forth. It's like there's a wall and the client is constantly trying to push and we have to push back. And it's kind of a constant, like, play. But I will say it gets to a point where it's a lot easier. And if a client asks me, hey, do you have 5 minutes? I'm like, no, I don't have 5 minutes to hop on a call because I'm doing something else. And that's okay. I'm not sat here like waiting, for you to like decide that you want to chat, right? Like we have set times throughout the week where we can set calls that are scheduled. But yeah, I'd say the onus is on us. And that for me has never come at the expense of revenue. If anything, it's led to an increase in revenue.
That's awesome. And I think one of the best way to avoid this is having a good selection of clients in the beginning.
Yes, and I think this becomes easier as you get more experience and you get more have your pick of clients. But there will be difficult clients as well. And I'm lucky because I'm in a position where I can choose not to work with those people. Boundaries is something that for me is really, really important, not because I'm not super serious about my work, because anyone who knows me is like, can we not talk about systems or a calendar, please? Because too much. But it's more so just because I can't show up the way that I want to show up if at 8 p.m. I go to bed at 9. If at 8 p.m. I'm trying to reply to clients, because then I can't sleep and I need a lot of sleep to function. So I think it can be really, really challenging. Ultimately, the more you do this line of work, the easier it gets. But I think just staying, like holding on to those boundaries. I think if you have a family, that is a huge priority, right? Like you have to prioritize time. I had a really absent father when I was a child. If I ever have children, that will be a huge priority. So I think if you have a young family, if you have a family, if you have priorities outside of business, which we all do, and we shouldn't feel guilty for admitting we do, it doesn't make us less of a business owner, less of an entrepreneur, then we have to have those boundaries in place and just hold tight to them and reinforce those at every opportunity.
That's a great reminder to everybody. So you've been working with clients and in the high ticket space for so long. And many of our listeners struggle with pricing. What advice would you give to help consultants confidently charge high ticket monthly retainers without questioning their worth?
There are a couple of different strands to that question, I think. One of them is to do with mindset. It is hard, especially earlier in the journey, to feel really confident. If we don't have the reps in, if we haven't done this, before, it is really challenging to feel confident charging a high price point. And high is relative, right? Like high to me may mean something different. I've been in the high ticket space for a really, really long time and have helped many people transition into the high ticket space. And so for me, high ticket is a lot. Like, it can range from a couple thousand to upwards of 50,000 plus dollars. But for some people, it may be, 999, it might be a little bit lower. So I think high ticket is relative. I think if you are earlier in the journey, and this is something that is still new, I would advise not worrying too much about price. And perhaps if you connect with ideal clients, asking them, let's say they have X problem, what would they realistically pay for someone to come in and help them solve X problem? And using that as kind of a measure of, okay, this is realistic. And then if you know that you want to increase that and create a really bespoke kind of high caliber service, then you know that you're going to want to be increasing that. But I think a price is interesting. And some people talk about price as if it's science. It's not. There isn't really a, if X equals Y, then it's 50 grand. If Y equals A, then it's 999. It's just kind of what the market is willing to pay for what you offer. I think having a look around and seeing what competitors are charging, are they drastically more experienced than you? If so, they're going to charge a higher price point. You need to be okay with that. And then just think about it as, I want to get to that kind of price point. I need to put in some of the reps, be able to say that I've worked with X number of clients, and then can kind of increase based off of that. So it isn't really a science. There isn't like a right or a wrong way. If you are like, yeah, it's 10 grand for this service and no one is buying, then maybe you need to revisit your price or look at the experience that you have and the service. Obviously, if you've been in it for years, you can charge a higher price point because you have more experience. It's like, if you're applying to a corporate job and you have 20 years of experience, you're going to warrant a higher salary than an entry-level candidate. It's not scientific, but you just have to be quite logical in how you approach pricing. I have seen too many entry-level people come into the space and charge high ticket when they don't have the reps. They don't have the experience behind them. And I think that is also not good, because at the end of the day, you don't have proof of concept. You don't have years behind you going, yeah, I've helped XYZ people get to this, whatever, the service or the product helps them do. And so I just think approaching it in a smart way, and just knowing that pricing changes. So it's not that you have to pick something now and you stick to it forever. Like, your price can change. And a good way to think about this is, let's say I'm taking on consulting work and I have 10 consulting clients. Okay. My capacity is 12. Okay. I get to 12 and then I can put my prices up, because I'm like, I cannot take on more clients. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase my pricing. Majority of the people that I'm working with, my 12, will be completely cool with that, because they're in, if the service is good, the product is good, they're like, you're great, like, love working with you. And I'm like, I cannot take on more. I'm going to increase my pricing. And then you can do that when you get to that stage. But starting off too high is problematic for various reasons. So it is a tricky one. I know that wasn't like a very clear-cut answer, but it is a tricky thing to navigate, and it's something that ultimately we have to test and just see and kind of iterate off of feedback that we're getting from the audience, buyers. If we're not getting buyers, then also kind of iterate off of that.
Makes a lot of sense. I think something that helped me a lot when I do market research is ask them what they're really invested in. It gives you a better understanding of something that already happened. So is not just saying you something to make you feel good about your idea. It's money actually they invested.
I think that's great as well. Great addition.
Noor, what's your framework for turning project-based client into predictable monthly retainers?
That's a really interesting question. I would say that for me, showcasing continued value is key. So if you get brought on for a project, you do the project. Number one, do the project well. Because that's just going to help you build. If someone's bought from you, they clearly trust you already to a degree. But then showing by virtue of doing whatever the project is to a really high standard, just is going to reinforce and increase that trust that is already there. I'll use myself as an example, kind of set up basic operations. So project management system for the team, kind of cadence for performance reviews, tracking metrics, all of this stuff. If you are interested in turning that project into a kind of consistent retainer, which you would want to do for various reasons, I'd say the big one is just kind of more stability in terms of revenue. So you know that you have X coming in every month. I'd say, first of all, you want to look at what that retainer entails. So is that going to be something that's dependent on your time? And that could mean you get a weekly call with me every single week. Is that something that you want less dependent on your time? So maybe it's bi-weekly, maybe it's every month, something like that. And so figuring out what that looks like, and then making sure that you can convey what additional value that adds to the business owner, whoever you're kind of whoever you're going to be like kind of directly impacting, basically. So it might be, and I do fractional work for a few clients, and meaning that they have access to me within parameters, boundaries. So for them, that made sense because they want to continue expanding their operation, meaning that there needs to be conversations around hiring, strategic hires. Who do we hire? Who do we have to let go of? What does that look like? How do we go about hiring? Enjoy that process. I'm also very good at it. So that's something that I added to that like monthly retainer thing. It's like I will take charge of all the hiring, all that and kind of entails the onboarding, setting up that infrastructure for a seamless onboarding. And at that point, it just made sense for that to be a monthly retainer thing, because it was like, okay, if we're going to keep this like a project kind of basis, then it becomes a little bit more complex. It's also more costly. So that's kind of what I would advise. I think just being really clear as to what that value is going to look like and why it makes the most sense for them to move to that structure is going to be key. And more often than not, that's going to be revolve around like your time and kind of giving that for whatever the fee is, including that. But then also less fixed deliverables. So when you do a project, it's like you have XYZ deliverables that needs to be handed over by end of the project. When you're on a retainer, there are less clear-cut deliverables, and it's more so, at least in my kind of world, it's more so that I'm involved in spearheading strategic decisions, supporting the CEOs, being like, here's what I've seen works really well, here's what I think the next steps are for this business, and then supporting with the various things that need to happen in order for us to get there. Now, that may not apply, obviously, to someone else in a different niche, different industry, but whether you're in a marketing role, in a product role, in a sales role, again, the key is going to be showcasing what value the business owner will be getting in something like a monthly retainer that they will not be able to get in a project kind of contractor type agreement. And then just kind of making that like abundantly clear so that when you present them with that, it's kind of a no-brainer. Like, you know, it's so clear that you're not really selling. It's just like, this is the logical decision. So like, cool, let's move forward type thing.
Love it. Most consultants stop generating income the moment they take time off. What's the first step to creating income that isn't directly tied to your available hours?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and something that I've actually been thinking about a lot lately. I guess there are kind of two strands of this. If you're a solopreneur, the easy answer, or the kind of obvious answer, is productizing your knowledge. So right now, again, I'll use myself as an example. I do fractional work for a few clients, and then I do consulting, like kind of one-off consulting or coaching sessions for entrepreneurs. Now, all of that is dependent on my time. So if it's not me, it's not feasible. And because I don't want to, you know, have someone else in my place doing that. Again, people are paying for me. They're not paying for someone that I manage or coach. And the way around that would be productizing, taking what's in my head and creating information and action steps around that so people can do that and rely on my time less. Not that you're going to completely remove that, but let's say I wanted to take 2 weeks off and I have a monthly group coaching with everyone that I kind of work with, or a bi-weekly group coaching with everyone that I work with. That's more feasible than you are needing to be available, you know, every day or, you know, every couple of days, whatever it is. So productizing is the first one. And I would say the second one is leveraging people. So leveraging a team. So if you have a team, then your team can do some of the fulfillment, your team can do some of the work, some of the kind of technical aspects. Again, it depends on like what it is your business is and like what sort of work that you do. Having a team allows you to take a step back so that you're not having to do things and the business can still bring in revenue without it relying on, hey, show up to this call to fulfill so that we get a message in Stripe saying money's come in. So those are kind of like the two, I would say, key ways. Another way to think about this is like front loading. This works really well if you are doing like project work, or even if you're doing consulting and it's like a one-off hour or few hours that someone pays, and then that's kind of it. So let's say it's the 12th of March today. So let's say that I want to take April off. Like the first 2 weeks of April, I want to go to Thailand and sit in Thailand and have like a technical tech detox cleanse and like not have technology around me at all. What I could do is front load all of my consulting work that I do. So let's say I want to be bringing in like arbitrary number, like let's say 10 grand a month from all the different avenues that, I have. And I want to be able to hit 10 grand in April despite taking 2 weeks off. What I would do is like kind of push my consulting work that I would be planning to kind of undertake in April into the end of March. So that come April, I've already brought in, let's say 6 grand, 5 grand, whatever. And then when I get back, I just kind of pick things up. So that if you're doing project work and it's dependent on deliverables, you move as fast as you want, you move as slow as you want. So in theory, if you want to have all your deliverables done and dusted in the first 2 weeks or the last 2 weeks of the month, you can do that. Like there isn't an issue, again, depending on how your agreement is structured. And if you're taking one-off consulting sessions, it's a similar thing. I can just close my calendar and I'm not available for this time. And I can reach out to people who are interested and let them know, hey, I am not going to be available in April. March is also a really good time to do this because it's the end of the first quarter. So it'll be good to, connect and, make sure that you're on the right track so that come, day one, Q2, you're clear, the team is clear, blah, blah, blah. And I would position it that way. So I'd say that's, those are kind of like the two different ways, productizing and then leveraging a team. And then if you're a contractor, you do like project work, then essentially you get to decide when you work. And I would just make sure that the way that your contracts are set up allows you flexibility. So it's not like I want to see where the deliverables are at week 1 and week 2 and week 3 and week 4, because some clients are like that and are a little bit more like micromanaging. So just making sure that the contracts support the flexibility that you want.
That's awesome. So as a solopreneur, there are so many moving parts that we have to manage every day, especially when you have consulting in mix. What operations mistake keeps consultant stuck in the 3 to 5K monthly income ceiling, and what to do instead?
That's a really, really good question. I would say these two kind of things are kind of the same thing, but slightly different. I hope that will make sense when I explain. But I think it boils down to too much time spent working in the business, not enough time working on the business and thinking about that growth. And that ties into prioritization. So oftentimes when people are doing consulting work, it is very, very easy to just feel like you're swimming and like you're just trying to keep up with all these deliverables and client calls and, all of this stuff. It is very hard. And that's a completely different headspace than working on your business. And I know because I'm in this situation right now. So for me, I have my priorities for what I want to do for NVB Collective every week. And I make sure that that is aligned with my overall goal of growth and, whatever it is I'm trying to do. And then I have my to-dos. I don't call them priorities because it's different. To-dos for my clients. So let's say I have been working on building out some infrastructure for a client, and I told the client that that was going to be ready to deploy by end of week. I know that that's something I need to check off because there's a deadline. So that is a to-do list item. But I think not losing sight of your priorities for your business is really, 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 really key. And it has to be a non-negotiable. So for me, an example is when I set off to start my consulting business in November 2024, I made a commitment to myself that I had been behind the scenes for over 4.5 years, and that if people were going to trust me, I had to be visible, which seems, it's like, very like obvious. But in order for me to be visible, I had to make myself visible, meaning I had to start thinking about content, which for me was such a like cringe thing because it was something I'd always hated. But again, I thought about how can I be realistic about this so that I can be consistent and that this is like a non-negotiable for me. So I looked at platforms, I settled on LinkedIn. It was the one that felt most aligned to who I am and love it. And I have posted every day since I made that decision. But that for me, it's not even a priority. It's like a non-negotiable. And that has allowed me to grow on LinkedIn. So yes, I am working in the business because I'm actively working on client accounts and doing calls with them and hiring for them and supporting the CEOs when they have moments where they're like, I have no idea what to do. This is like, I have too much on my mind. So I wouldn't be able to grow if I was sidelining my business, and I would have capped, at a very low revenue level if it wasn't for making my business a non-negotiable and like prioritizing that daily, and sitting and reflecting and being like, where do I want to be at the end of March? Where do I want to be at the end of April? What needs to happen for me to get there? And then putting it in my calendar so it gets done. So I think to go back to your question, which is, what operational mistake is a failure to prioritize accordingly, given that revenue growth is the goal. So if revenue growth is the goal, you need to reverse engineer that. What needs to happen? Is it that you need to get more visibility? Cool. How are you going to do that? Are you going to be posting on social media? Are you running ads? Like, what is it that you need to do? And reverse engineering that till you get to daily activities and then putting that in your calendar. And if it's in your calendar, it has to get done. So I often talk to people who are like, I have a calendar. And I'm like, okay. And we look at it and I'm like, oh, great. So like you're doing this. No, I didn't do that. I ended up like on my phone, or I ended up on Slack, or I ended up replying to WhatsApp. And I'm like, so I said, like, you didn't do it. So I think reverse engineering and making sure that those daily activities are things that are actually being done and not sideline is key. And then just checking in with yourself as well. So I check in every week. I check in every day, but like I do like a weekly reflection. How did things go? Are we on track? Everything good? I check in with my assistant, make sure that she's very clear of like where we're at. I'll ask her how she think, things went. But it boils down to prioritization.
I love talking to you about operations, about solopreneurship. For example, you just mentioned now, and if you can explain the difference between not negotiable, to-do list, and priorities. Because it seems all these elements are working together on your calendar, on your plans. So can you explain a little bit better?
Yeah, I love that question. No one's ever asked me that. So non-negotiable is something that happens usually daily for me, but it's not something that I actively I don't have that on like a to-do list or a priority list, because it's something that is baked into my routine, whether that's usually it's daily, sometimes it's weekly. So for me, an example of a non-negotiable is LinkedIn. So I post every single day and I spend approximately 45 minutes on the platform engaging with people every single day, Monday through Sunday, since November, I think 1st till present day. So that isn't something that I'm like, today I need to do LinkedIn, because it's a non-negotiable. I don't think about it. If I don't feel like doing it, if I'm tired, if I had a bad day, doesn't matter. It gets done. I walk my dog daily. That's a non-negotiable. She has to go out. It's not, again, if I'm sick, if I'm tired, if I don't feel like it, she still needs to go out. So that's the non-negotiables. And the priorities, I don't allow any more than 3 on my list for the week. So I have those on my Trello, weekly priorities, and I just need to see those every single week. And then there are various things that are attached to those priorities, as in like to-dos. So an example for me is earlier this week, I launched a 14-day email sequence to help people get basic operations in place. My weekly priority was to launch that. To-do items related to that were testing the back end, having myself, my assistant, and someone from my friend group sign up to that to make sure that the emails were firing correctly at the right times, everything was running, according to plan, making sure the landing pages were like good to go, everything was approved, the right images were there, etc. The right tagging was in place, all the like back end stuff. So that's kind of the difference. Priorities are just the bigger picture things that you want to see happen this coming week. You can have priorities for the month as well. I do as well, but I call them goals, slightly different. And then the to-do list is all the actions that need to happen. So you can structure this, in different ways. You can have like a bigger item and then sub items, but all of that will go in a to-do list. So that's the difference between like those 3. Sometimes people will tell me, yeah, it's on my to-do list to train. And I'm like, okay, but I'll know this person. I'm like, oh, but you've been training for like 3 years. They're like, yeah. I'm like, why is that taking like space up on your to-do list? Like it's just baked into your routine. It's a non-negotiable for you. You train, like you are a person who trains 5 days a week or whatever. They're like, yeah. So I think oftentimes people's to-do lists get really cluttered because there's stuff on there that really shouldn't be on there. So like I train 6 days a week. I drink 3 liters of water every day. I eat high protein. I walk my dog. Those things are not on my to-do list. It's just baked into my routine. It's baked into my calendar. So I think your to-do list should be things that you need to check off daily and aren't like a non-negotiable or like a staple in your routine. So hopefully that kind of showcased the difference.
How can parents doing consulting organize their systems to accommodate, for example, school holidays without disappointing clients? So making sure that the operation keep running smoothly.
I think the first thing is to understand that there is a lot that we can automate. Not everything has to be manual, at least of all now in the kind of era that we live in. So figuring out what makes sense to automate is going to be really, really key. Justin Welsh is a really great inspiration of mine. He's on LinkedIn, and I really respect him because he's trying to challenge the way that people think about businesses and what it means to run a business, a successful business. That appeals to me. I'll tell you what does not appeal to me. The Hormozy hustle, I work all the time, and I will give it to them. They have never said that that is how everyone should work, which I think is the thing that makes them different. They don't make others feel bad or feel like they cannot be successful because their entire existence is their business and the gym. So I think figuring out, again, and this happens before, these are things that you need to think about before and then make sure are very clear in when you onboard clients and how you communicate expectations to them. You need to figure out how you want to work and how much you want to work and whether that's realistic for you. So I am relatively young. I don't have children. I am not married. If I want to work 12-hour days, I can work 12-hour days. Do I choose to work 12-hour days? Absolutely not. Like, I need to sleep. And I have a lot of hobbies outside of business. I love what I do. I wouldn't change it for the world. But I love fiction. I love the theater. I love training. Like, I have other things that, fill me up. So I'm not interested in working 12-hour days. Eventually, I would love to work 5 to 6 hour days and read, like learn, like, do other things, have conversations like this and have that be, what makes up the bulk of my work. So I think getting clear on what that looks like to each person is really, really important. And it can be really, really hard because we still operate in a space that tells us that we should be working 12-hour days. We should be hustling, that without it, you're falling behind because there's a young person in his bedroom who's working 16-hour days and you're competing with this person. So I think defining what success looks like for you, what the ideal working day, week, month looks like for you, and then reverse engineering that. What do we need to do to get there? Do you need to bring someone on who can support you? Do you need to leverage automation? Do you need to delegate a little bit more and have more people around you so that if a child falls ill or there's a school holiday or you want to travel with your partner and your kid, you can do that and not be like, I have to stay because otherwise there's no money coming in and clients are going to get upset. So figuring out what that looks like is really key. And then thinking as early as you can. I often talk to freelancers and solopreneurs who are like, no, systems are great, but it's just me. I'm like, same. And I have a more systematized business than people that have teams of 10 people. And when people see, like, sometimes I show my calendar or I show my Trello and people are like, how? And I'm like, because I have systems. Like, let me talk to you about this. So I think the key thing is figuring out those two things. What does success look like? What do you want your days, weeks, months to look like? And then reverse engineering that. So figuring out what needs to happen for you to have those two things. And typically it's going to involve some level of support. Now, that could be an assistant, but school holidays, we know in advance, we can plan around them. at point of onboarding, your client knows that work is going to go out to them on these days, not these, because you're away. And just being really transparent about that, I think, is really key. That's easier said than done because, again, we operate in a space that makes us feel bad for not dreaming about our business, sitting at our desk, eating food, sacrificing time with loved ones. But I really believe that we're seeing the end of that, and we're seeing more people coming up and talking about working 4-hour days, traveling, spending time with loved ones, like systems, automation, a team, and using those things to get back your time so that you can live the life that you want. Because ultimately, most of us get into business to build our dream lives, to have more freedom, and to have freedom of choice, whether that's location, time, money, all of these things, but we end up handcuffed to our businesses, and it's just not necessary. And systems are the way out of that. They're the way towards freedom. So yeah, that's kind of how I would take that.
Every time it's so refreshing talking to you, Noor. You went from completely invisible as an operator
Yeah.
to a respected consultant, publishing every day on LinkedIn, sharing your voice. By the way, I love your post. Everybody should follow you. Besides this, how your identity shifted, and what advice would you give to anybody in the same situation, anybody taking the leap?
I'll be completely honest. I'm still learning how to navigate this. I am naturally very, very introverted. I live at home with my dog. I like staying at home with my dog. I have a very, very small tribe of people. My network of people that are very close to me and know me intimately is very, very small. And I like it that way. I've always been that way. And for me, it was comfortable sitting behind the scenes. And that's why I did it for so long, because I was very comfortable sitting at home behind my screen, talking to my virtual team, running virtual businesses, and not being in the spotlight for various reasons. Like, natural inclination is one of them, but various other reasons. And I think for me, when I realized that I had a lot to share and a lot more to offer and stepped out on my own, I really had a long think about what that would mean for me, for my public persona. I knew that I couldn't do that sitting behind the scenes, but there was so much that I disagreed with about the space and what I was told I had to do and what I was told I had to give up in order to be successful, to be respected. And I was like, there is a different way. And I'm gonna build something on my own and show people via building this that there is a different way. And I knew that for me, the most uncomfortable and the most difficult part of the journey over the last four-ish months has been being front facing, not so, but like it is my face out there. That has been the most uncomfortable part of this. And not because of reputational risk or anything like that, because I like to think that everyone who works closely with me walks away very, very happy. And that's how, that's the experience that I've had thus far. But yeah, I think more so just, I guess, the fear of really putting yourself out there and going up against an industry that is really robust and set in its ways, and kind of, bumping heads with people like the Hormozis, people, who are like, hustle, hustle, hustle. And I'm like, it's not like, just drop it. It's not like, if you want to do that, cool. But like, I've done it, and you can do it for a year, maybe 2 years, but then you collapse and it's not sustainable. And I think what we should be talking about when we talk about scaling is sustainability. And that's a word that is never mentioned in conversations around scaling. So to try and answer your question, I would encourage people to take decisions, make sure that every decision you take is something that feels aligned with you. Because I have been told to do more video, I need to do more this, I need to present in this way, I need to wear more just like silly things, but none of that is genuine and none of that felt like me. And I made a commitment to myself when I decided to get into this that I wouldn't do anything that felt like I was going against who I was. And if people didn't like it, that's absolutely fine. Like, I'm not trying to be the next Layla Hormozi. You know what I mean? That's not my ambition, to operate at that scale. If I can change a few business owners' lives, if I can make the difference between someone almost burning out and then being like, I don't actually need to do this. Let's backtrack. Let's look at systems. Let's look at this. Then I'm happy. I can sleep very, very happy at night and be very fulfilled in what I do. But that is really, really hard to do. I'm not going to lie, because the pressures that you experience, I think, especially as a young woman in this space, you're constantly facing comparison and you should do this, you shouldn't do that, you need to do more of this. And it can be really, really, really tough. And I think having a really robust network around you, and for me, that's meant building new connections, because everyone in my little tribe, no one operates in this space. So they're all corporate, traditional jobs. So it's very, very hard for me to be like, I'm really struggling because this happened on LinkedIn today. And they're like, okay, like, sure. So I think for me, it's been really, really key to connect with people on LinkedIn. And it's made me feel a lot less alone in the journey. And again, that was something that I really did not put value on until I started this journey. But it's been huge for me. Even people like yourself reaching out and saying, "Yeah, you're doing a good job. Like, this is really interesting. I really enjoy the content that you're putting out there." Like, that is kind of the stuff that keeps me going and is like, okay, I'm appealing to the right people. Like, doesn't matter if I'm not growing as fast or, any of these things like that does not matter to me. So I think just focusing, keeping your head down, focusing on the right things and making sure that you feel good with the decisions that you make, because ultimately it's our businesses, right? Like, no one else. I think there's a lot of beauty in that, but there's a lot of stress as well. It's like, no one is here telling me to do this, to make this decision, to not do this. I have to make it, but I have to also be the one that's okay with it at the end of the day. So I think just staying true to yourself and feeling like you can really stand by the decisions you make because they feel good to you has been, yeah, that's the advice that I would give, I think.
I think it's a very good advice, especially when most of us are driven by the pressure created in the marketplace from other players. And you feel like everybody is doing this, I must do, I'm missing out. When in reality, if you are true to yourself, you will probably be more appealing for people that feel the same or vibe up the same level as yours.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. No, thank you for creating space for me to share it. Yeah. Thank you so much.
So we talk about operations, systems, mindset. Let me ask you a questions about revenue and earning.
Okay.
So what's a daily operational habit that separates struggling consultant from those consistently making 10K plus a month?
This isn't a daily habit. I'd say this is more of a weekly habit. It still shocks me how few entrepreneurs of smaller businesses, because as you grow, there's someone else who's responsible for this, but it still shocks me that there are so few entrepreneurs that a live pulse on money going outgoings and incomings. So money coming in, money going out. Like, I guarantee you, if you ask an entrepreneur of a small business, solopreneur, how much is in the account right now? How much has come out today or this week? Most won't know. So I think having a system where you can see exactly how much money is coming out of the account and exactly how much is due to come in, like forecasting revenue for the coming month. And very few entrepreneurs know that. So that for me is something that is so important, because if you don't know where you're at revenue wise, and if you don't know where you're at in terms of outgoings, you're in a really, really tricky spot. And I think this is something that far too many people are very lax about. They're just like, there's money there, it's fine. And the other thing that I think is really key, which may seem like such a small thing, but you'll be surprised how many business owners have these. This is obscene. This is something where, like, sometimes I'll go into a business and I'll look at the numbers and I'll just cut these little subscriptions, and suddenly the profit margins change, and the business owners are like, what's happened? And I'm like, well, you had like 5 of these subscriptions to Lord knows what software that you're not using, but it's like £100 here, £200 here, another £100 here. And if you're looking at 100,000, plus a month, that's really insignificant. But when you're talking about someone who's doing under 10K, that adds up. That's, a significant portion of revenue. So I think looking at expenses, if you have software expenses that are coming out on a monthly basis, because that makes more sense maybe early on in terms of cash flow, then making sure that they're things that you're actively using, not just like, I'm paying £20 for Canva because I don't know why, I just always have, so it's there. And I'm paying, I don't know, for premium Zapier, but like, I don't even know what Zapier is. I was just told that I should use it. Just making sure that you have a good pulse on all of those things, and then making decisions to cut things that you don't need, and keeping a pulse on that, I think is really, really key. You should be looking at numbers on a weekly basis, and then you should be looking at numbers on a monthly basis and having a wider look at and kind of think through forecasting all of these things, outgoings, etc. That's something that far too few people do. And oftentimes the response I get is like, oh yeah, I'll get the numbers from the accountant. I'm like, when you're a small business, you should be looking at this. Yeah, like I have an accountant and he does all of my books for me and all of this. But I also have a spreadsheet that tells me how much is going in every single month, like forecasted, like this is recurring revenue. And then projected, this is kind of like what we're looking at potentially coming in. And then I also have like a minimum monthly spend sheet, which is like, here are all the subscriptions, here's what I pay my editor, here's what I pay myself, here's like, these are all the fixed outgoings, so that I can see that and I can also calculate profit margins. But again, most people don't do this. And then they get to like, later on in the journey, they're like, I have an accountant and I have an operator and I think they kind of know what's going on, but I'm also not really sure. So I need to ask them. And it's like, you should really know these things as a business owner. So that's kind of what I would say, like keeping a close pulse on finances is really, really key.
The moment you start struggling, then it's probably too late to go and check what outgoings are.
Yeah, I think it's such an underrated thing. So I'd say a close pulse on finances in terms of like an operational habit that separates those that do 10K plus from those that do less is key. But then also having, just to add to my answer and make it less about finances, also having a prioritizing in terms of, because I gave you like a weekly activity, in terms of daily activity, prioritizing connections, I think is really, really key. So if you are prioritizing speaking to people and having conversations with people, eventually, if you get to the point where you're like, I want to bring on 5 more clients, you have a good basis to then go and be like, I have all these conversations in like, DMs on LinkedIn or Instagram or, whatever it is. I can now like go and start actively having conversations with these people about what's going on for them right now. What are they looking to do in Q2? Is there support that they need, and kind of have that like open loop there. But that's something that, again, is usually sidelined until, like you said, people are in a spot where they need a client. And then it's harder to do because you're operating out of a place of scarcity and need rather than, this is just part of my daily activity. I'm talking to you. I want to build a relationship. And then things kind of happen organically rather than like, I need a client, get on a call with me. And it's like, no, I don't want to get on a call with you. So yeah, I always find it interesting when people reach out to me, because this is happening more now, I guess, because of growth on LinkedIn. And they will reach out to me and be like, hi, I think we should get on a call because I can help. And I'm like, help with what? Like, we haven't, hi, how are you? Like, how's it going? It already gives you like the ick. And it's like, maybe that person could have helped me. But again, I think operating from a place of, let's just connect, let's add value, let's see what we can talk about is really key. And that starts before you need something.
Absolutely. Because relationships build opportunities, but conversations generate cash flow.
Yeah, for sure.
Are there any questions I should have asked you to help our listeners build better system for their consulting business, but I haven't asked you yet?
I don't think so. I think this has been such a like really enjoyable, at least for me, conversation, like very comprehensive. I will say, kind of just to hammer home one point, I would say that I still think that there's a lot of unknown around systems and what that means. And I think, again, it's kind of a buzzword that's used in this space. A lot of people don't know what that means. And if you don't know what it means, it sounds like something quite daunting that is really complex and like not within reach. And again, I just want to reiterate that simplicity is really, really, really key. A calendar is a system. Using a calendar is a system. having a process for organizing your day, your week, that is a system. Prioritization is a system. Having a place where you store your projects, your to-dos, all of this, that is a system. And it's not something that is super complex. It doesn't need to be something that you feel is not attainable, but it is absolutely something that, whether you are a freelancer, a consultant, solopreneur, you should get those things in place sooner rather than later, and they will only facilitate sustainable growth, which is what I think we should all be aiming for, not like rapid scale or anything like that, like sustainable growth. And then we, get the freedom that we want to live our best lives.
How can our listeners follow your journey?
I'm on LinkedIn, so it's just my full name, Noor Barrage. On LinkedIn, I post every day, and I'm trying to be really transparent about what's happening for me, things that I'm interacting. So I'd say that's probably the best place to find me. And as of this week, I have also started posting daily on Instagram as well. But LinkedIn is, I'd say, it's my little home. It's my little platform. So yeah, LinkedIn is the place to connect and find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. This conversation was so refreshing. And I love talking to you because I feel like so real talking with someone like you rather than the gurus telling you, implement this and that, your business will. It's like, no, everything has to be sustainable and true to yourself. Otherwise, probably you build something that you don't enjoy and you finish to hate. So thank you so much.
No, thank you so much for having me. I've loved the conversation. So yeah, thank you so much.
Talk to you soon. Have a lovely day.
You too. Bye bye.